A luxury seat, a cruel mistake, and a nightmare that turns into the ultimate reckoning. When Eleanor Caldwell, a high-profile executive, takes her first-class seat, she expects professionalism, respect, and a smooth flight. Instead, she's met with something far worse: deliberate humiliation, whispered mockery, and a crew determined to erase her presence. But what happens when the woman they try to degrade is the very person who holds their future in her hands? What starts as a routine flight becomes a ruthless battle for justice, a corporate scandal in the making, and a brutal lesson in power. By the time this plane lands, careers will be destroyed, reputations shattered, and those who thought they were untouchable will finally learn what it means to be powerless. How far should justice go? What would you do in Eleanor's place? Comment your thoughts below and let me know where you're watching from. And if you love stories of power, downfall, and the ultimate revenge, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications because this is just the beginning. JFK International Airport buzzed with its usual chaos, boarding calls echoing overhead, the rhythmic hum of suitcase wheels rolling across polished floors, and a low murmur of travelers immersed in their own hurried worlds. Eleanor Caldwell stood in the first-class boarding line, adjusting the strap of her leather handbag. Dressed in immaculate navy blue pantsuit, she was the picture of quiet sophistication. Yet experience had long taught her that appearances did not always grant respect. As she stepped forward, the gate agent, a middle-aged woman with sharp features and blonde hair, took her boarding pass. The woman hesitated for just a split second, her gaze flicking between Eleanor and the name printed on the ticket. The hesitation was barely perceptible, but Eleanor noticed. She always noticed. The woman's professional smile returned, practiced but hollow. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Caldwell," she said, her tone clipped. Eleanor nodded once, stepping forward without another word. The moment she entered the first-class cabin, she felt it, the shift. Conversation softened. Stolen glances lingered. Expressions grew unreadable. The usual energy of an exclusive world, where comfort and privilege intertwined, seemed to falter for just a breath. As she took her seat, she didn't look around. She didn't need to. Then came the voice. Didn't know they were letting just anyone into first class these days. Eleanor didn't turn. She knew exactly where the words came from. Seated in 3A was Richard Whitmore, a man in his mid-50s, dressed in an impeccable designer suit. His salt and pepper hair was slicked back, and he smirked as he scrolled through his tablet. The insult hung in the air between them like a foul stench. Eleanor exhaled slowly through her nose and continued to her seat, 2B, next to a man with auburn hair scribbling in a leather-bound journal. Liam Hayes. He introduced himself as she settled in. His tone was polite, neutral. Eleanor nodded once, fastening her seatbelt. She knew what would come next. Jessica Langley, the lead flight attendant, began moving through the aisle, distributing menus to passengers one by one. She did so with the ease of someone who had done this routine hundreds of times, offering polite small talk, an extra smile here, a brief conversation there. When she reached Eleanor's row, she did not stop. No explanation, just a simple, deliberate exclusion. Eleanor's gaze didn't waver, but she took note. Minutes passed. The scent of freshly plated meals wafted through the air. Trays were placed delicately before each passenger. Wine glasses filled with deep red liquid. Every plate meticulously arranged for presentation. Then Jessica returned. "We only have one option left," she said, her voice clipped. "Chicken or vegetarian? No epaligi. No acknowledgement." Eleanor's eyes flicked down to her tray as it was placed before her. Unlike the polished dishes served to other passengers, hers looked haphazardly thrown together. The sauce pooled to one side. A missing bread roll. An afterthought rather than a meal. Across the aisle, Richard let out a low chuckle. "You should be grateful. Some people don't even get served." Eleanor didn't respond. She picked up her fork. She ate. The low hum of the aircraft engines blended with the hushed chatter of first-class passengers. The gentle clinking of cutlery against fine china, the subdued laughter of those enjoying the exclusivity of their elevated status. Eleanor Caldwell sat motionless in seat 2B, her posture composed, her face a mask of impassivity. The barely perceptible weight of the previous insults, subtle yet searing, lingered in the air around her. But she gave no sign of acknowledgement. She had learned long ago that reacting only fed their satisfaction. Jessica Langley's presence was impossible to ignore. The lead flight attendant floated effortlessly between passengers, her tone shifting seamlessly from warm hospitality to detached professionalism, depending on whom she was addressing. Eleanor watched as Jessica refilled wine glasses with an indulgent smile, adjusting a gentleman's napkin with feigned affection. And yet, when she passed Eleanor's seat, it was as if she wasn't there. The avoidance was intentional, deliberate. "Excuse me," a voice murmured beside Eleanor. It was Liam Hayes, the auburn-haired journalist. His eyes darted toward Jessica's retreating figure. His fingers rested on the stem of his wine glass, hesitating. "You didn't get a menu earlier, did you?" Eleanor glanced at him, but said nothing. She knew what he was implying. He had noticed. Liam exhaled through his nose, his gaze contemplative. "Interesting," he mused before taking a slow sip of his wine. He didn't push further, but his awareness hung between them like an unspoken truth. Moments later, the clatter of a service cart approached. Another flight attendant, this one younger, a brunette with softer features, pushed the cart forward. Sophie Grant. Eleanor remembered her name from the badge pinned neatly to her uniform. Jessica appeared again, leading the meal service. "Would you care for another glass, Mr. Whitmore?" she cooed, pausing at 3A. Richard Whitmore barely acknowledged her as he tilted his glass forward, his attention still fixed on the tablet in his lap. She chuckled lightly at something he didn't say. Then she turned and locked eyes with Sophie. The brunette hesitated. Eleanor knew that look. It was the silent command of hierarchy, Jessica's quiet assertion of control. Sophie shifted her weight, gripping the edge of the cart tighter, her expression conflicted. Jessica smiled. "You don't need to bother with her," she said lightly, just loud enough for Eleanor to hear. Sophie's jaw tensed, but she nodded without hesitation. Jessica moved on, bypassing Eleanor completely,